picnics to be noisy, book early.
The number of people killed on our roads is a daily tragedy, with next month, November, the worst of the year, 50% worse than the safest month. But the statistics show that in recent years there's been a huge drop in deaths, and we're already approaching the target set by the government for the year 2000. Now, the one group of road users who can claim no credit for this drop in casualties is us, the car drivers. And that's because the number of injury accidents hasn't fallen at all. In other words, we're not driving any better. So why has there been this big reduction in road deaths? Well, there are three fairly obvious reasons. We have better medical services like air ambulances and paramedics. We have better cars with crumple zones and seatbelts. And we have better engineered roads with better sightlines and more bypasses. There is another factor that's not so obvious, but it becomes clearer when you split the casualty rates into different road users. Over the last 20 years, road deaths are down by 40% overall, but for motorists, the fall is only 1/3, while for pedestrians, the figure has been cut in half. So what's happened to make the roads apparently so much safer for pedestrians?
See, the reason why the number of pedestrians killed on the roads has gone down is because pedestrians have modified their behaviour. They're either not there because they're in cars, or else very often they're actually scared to cross the roads. A lot of children are not allowed out by their parents so much. A lot of elderly people won't make journeys crossing the road so much. The available figures we have are that the chances of pedestrians being killed have actually gone up. So if you add that all up, I'm afraid the situation for pedestrians is a great deal worse.
Now, whether or not we're going to see a change in the way people drive to make our streets safer for old people, for children and for cyclists depends very much on the guidance, on the signals we give drivers about the way society views a style of driving that puts other road users in danger. One such signal is this special 20-mile-an-hour zone in the Tinsley district of Sheffield. Now, we reported from here on Top Gear 2 years ago when it was one of the first in the country. Since then, the lower limit and the essential traffic calming measures that make it virtually self-enforcing have reduced traffic speeds and volumes, particularly in the rat runs.
Well, this is a local speedway. Cars and lorries and buses and all sorts of things used to come flying down here because a lot of vehicles used to take a shortcut from off Borchin Road to get to Rotherham. They used to use this, but they no longer use it. Or most of them don't use it now because of the bumps. It slowed them down, and it slowed them down a hell of a lot.
So it's slowed down the traffic and it's cut down the traffic?
Yes. Oh yes, that there's no doubt.
One clear benefit is the reduction in accidents. For the 67 20-mile-an-hour zones now in operation over the country, there appears to be a drop of around 85 to 90% in child accidents. Naturally, local communities are supportive.
A majority of the community is satisfied because the main objective of this scheme was to save children from the accidents, and it has worked very well. So majority are satisfied.
And does it mean that children can play on the streets now?
Yes, it's safer for children if they are playing outside. If some vehicle is coming up, they know that it is not very fast. At least either the driver will stop or the children will move off the road. So it is a lot safer.
Pushing through traffic out of the residential areas means the distributor routes on their boundaries are made busier. In this area of Sheffield, the city engineers are modifying junctions to control this extra traffic and to mitigate its effects on pedestrians.
It's very difficult for elderly people to cross, and in fact there have been several elderly people injured here. So we are making changes which will make it easier and safer for elderly people to cross. And also put the traffic flow back to something like what it was before the adjacent 20-mile-an-hour zone was introduced.
Low speed limits and traffic calming measures like these, which make them self-enforcing, are cheap and reliable ways of reclaiming the streets for people. But they cost time and money, and it's going to be some time before they become widespread. In the meantime, what signals are the police, the traditional enforcers of good behaviour, giving us about driving in towns? Well, the predominant impression one gets from the media is that the police are mainly concerned with speeding on motorways. There may be a great deal of law breaking on motorways, but their accident rate is very low, 1/10 of that on residential streets. Only 3% of accidents occur on motorways, while 74%, that's 3 out of 4 accidents, happen on built-up roads with speed limits of 40 miles an hour or less. In Sheffield, limited police manpower is deployed on major distributor routes, but they recognise that on many residential streets, even the legal maximum of 30 miles an hour is too fast.
Without a doubt, it is too fast. One of the problems, of course, is that from the driving seat of a car, motorists sometimes don't perceive the actual dangers that there are about. And, of course, in areas where the concerns of the public are greater, the perception from the roadside of a vehicle's speed can be completely different from that from the viewpoint of a driver.
The point is, driving down this sort of street, even at the legal maximum of 30 miles an hour, may still be irresponsibly dangerous. Wouldn't it be worth the police devoting some effort to monitoring these sort of streets, handing out warnings or even tickets to motorists who put cyclists and pedestrians at risk? Of course, the police will always plead lack of manpower and resources, but you don't need expensive equipment in residential areas to tell you someone's driving too fast for the conditions. But could you get a conviction on the basis of such a judgment? Well, the evidence of current prosecution policy, so far as drivers involved in fatal accidents are concerned, is emphatically no.
We all know now through a better media coverage that nothing much happens to these drivers, that the majority are only charged with a minor traffic offence, which results in a fine and a few points on the licence. And the offensive thing to victim families is that the death remains unaddressed, totally ignored.
Well, I mean, what sort of percentage of drivers are actually prosecuted for causing death?
Well, in our experience, only a very small minority, something like 8 or 10%, are charged with the death caused. But even then, the sentences are quite lenient and almost derisory.
So, current prosecution policy is the third signal given to drivers about their behaviour. You can kill someone through a mistake or a misjudgment, and the penalty is trivial or non-existent. Why?
Some deaths on the road result from what can be described as dangerous driving. Some deaths result from a momentary lapse of concentration on the part of the driver, and one looks at the file and sees that the consequences of the lapse of concentration are out of all proportion to the culpability of the driver, and that is very difficult indeed to explain to the relatives of the deceased. But it's not right to say that we are not concerned. We are concerned to get the right charge and to do what we can to explain to the relatives of the accused why it is that we've preferred the charge that we have.
So, do you take into account the consequences of the way that person was driving?
We've really got to look at the manner of the defendant's driving, and to a large extent the consequences don't come into the consideration in deciding what is the appropriate offence.
Are you concerned that by bringing charges of careless driving you're sending signals or messages to other drivers that they can get away with it?
No, I don't think we're sending signals that drivers can get away with anything. It's a matter of considering the defendant's driving objectively and deciding what criminal offences have been committed by him.
So while the government's hard-hitting campaigns urge us to drive more slowly to save the lives of children involved in accidents, the laws they've enacted seem heavily weighted in favour of the motorist. A driver's momentary loss of concentration may result in death and injury, but the charge will probably only be driving without due care and attention. Is this really an accurate reflection of the way we want deaths on the road to be treated? For Brigitte Chowdhury, we need to identify less with the drivers and more with the victims and their families.
There are some very clear-cut examples, like, for instance, the case of a mother who was watching her son cross on a zebra crossing, and she had made sure that the traffic had stopped for him, and as he was three-quarters through a car, had overtaken 3 vehicles waiting for him to cross, and killed him. And even in that case, driving without due care and attention charge was brought.
We all need to be much more aware of the potential of the car as a lethal weapon. Now, driving down this suburban road at 30 miles an hour, I'm generating more energy than the bullet from a pistol. 200 times more energy, in fact. You could argue I should be 200 times more careful.